a revolution in our ability to read DNA from ancient fossils. And this has revealed some amazing things about recent human evolutionary history.
For decades, the story of how humans first populated the Americas was a clear, settled map. But now, hidden deep in the Colombian highlands, 6,000 years old ancient DNA has opened a door to a forgotten chapter.
Then we would find this DNA signal in North America and in Central America. We would not find it only in the Amazon.
We are about to uncover a mysterious people, a ghost lineage, who lived, thrived, and then vanished completely, forcing scientists to rewrite the history of the entire continent. The known map and the ghost lineage. For a long time, if you opened a textbook to the chapter on human history in the Americas, the story was simple, neat, and easy to follow. We're talking about the famous Beringia model. Imagine a vast land bridge once connecting Siberia and Alaska, exposed during the last ice age. This was the highway the ancestors of Native Americans used to walk into a new world. They crossed the vast land bridge known as Beringia more than 15,000 years ago, moving south as the great ice sheets slowly withdrew, opening a path into a new and uncharted world. As these initial pioneer groups moved, scientists believed they eventually split into two primary genetic branches, the northern Native American lineage and the southern Native American lineage. These two great family trees served as the foundation for virtually every indigenous nation in both North and South America. It was the accepted theory: one entry point, two main groups, and a continuous flow of people spreading out to fill the continents. This simple narrative made sense, and for decades, it was the unquestioned truth, guiding archaeologists and geneticists alike. Now, picture those travelers pushing further south. They eventually hit Central America, a long and narrow strip of land that acts like a funnel. This geography gave Colombia a monumental, if often overlooked, role in world history. It wasn't a destination, it was the single crucial entry point into the entire southern half of the hemisphere. Think of it as the starting gate for all of South America. If you wanted to get to the Amazon, the Andes, or Patagonia, you had to pass through Colombia first. The underlying assumption was that this process was mostly continuous. As groups moved through this bottleneck, their lineages mixed and evolved, creating a single unbroken chain of genetic history running all the way down to Tierra del Fuego. The whole thing looked smooth, like pouring water through a tube. Despite its importance as this crucial gateway, Colombia remained a strange blind spot on the world's genetic map. Scientists had managed to sequence the ancient DNA of people in places like Chile and Peru, places much further south, but Colombia itself was mostly empty. Collecting ancient human genomes there proved incredibly difficult due to the environment and other challenges. This meant that the genetic map of the Americas was missing its most vital link, the very chain that connected the north to the south. It was like having a perfect family album for all your relatives, except for the one critical photo of the person who started the whole journey. Without actual DNA from ancient Colombians, scientists had to rely on mere assumptions about what happened in that critical junction thousands of years ago. They knew that a complete and accurate history of the settlement of the Americas was truly impossible until they cracked the code of this one region. The facts they had were strong, but the huge gap in the middle was a constant historical omission. For years, scientists filled that gap with educated guesses, but assumptions, no matter how logical, aren't science. The discovery sparked a sense of urgency. They had to uncover the truth buried in that blank space. Whatever lay hidden beneath Colombia's soil could either confirm everything they believed or rewrite history entirely. It was a gamble worth taking. The scientists knew they needed DNA from Colombia, and the best place to find ancient, well-preserved genetic material is usually where it's cold and dry. Their eyes landed on the Bogota Altiplano, the high plains that surround the capital city. This region is also known as the Cundiboyacense Plateau, sits nearly 2 miles up in the Andes. The cool, stable conditions there were a stroke of luck, essentially creating creating a natural freezer for ancient organic material. After years of careful work, an international research team, including experts from the University of Tübingen and Colombia's National University, successfully gathered samples. They collected bone and tooth fragments from 21 individuals found across 5 archaeological sites in that highland area. The samples spanned a huge chunk of time, representing people who lived anywhere from 6,000 years ago right up until about 500 years ago, just before the Spanish arrived. Getting this DNA out was a monumental task. Ancient DNA is incredibly fragile. It degrades easily and can be contaminated by modern sources. Think of it like trying to pull a clear message out of a million crackling radio signals. The team had to use the most advanced techniques available to carefully extract the tiny, precious fragments of genetic code. When they finally succeeded, they achieved something historic. They had generated the first ancient human genomes ever published from Colombia. This wasn't just another data point, it was the key that unlocked the continent's most mysterious genetic door. Finally, the blind spot was illuminated. What they found, however, didn't match the gentle flowing narrative of the textbook. The first big shock came when they analyzed the oldest samples, the ones dating back to around 6,000 years ago. These came mainly from a site called Checua. When they ran the genetic sequences through databases, comparing them to hundreds of other ancient and modern people from North and South America, the results didn't compute. 6 or 7 of those oldest Checua individuals produced genetic signatures that were immediately categorized as a complete unknown. The scientists were staring at genetic code that simply did not belong to the established American family tree. They carefully checked the data. Was it a contamination? Was the dating wrong? Number. The evidence was clear. These people did not genetically link up with the southern Native American lineage that was supposed to dominate that region. They were entirely distinct. The conclusion was undeniable. A population of people lived in the heart of the Americas 6,000 years ago whose genetic history was fundamentally separate from the Native Americans we thought we knew. The map wasn't just incomplete, it was wrong. This variation was the discovery of a ghost lineage, people who existed outside the known rules of history, right at the crossroads of the continent. The genetic foundation of the Americas was suddenly a lot more crowded and confusing than anyone had ever dared to imagine. We now know they existed, but what does it truly mean to be unrelated? The answer hides within their DNA, where a closer look uncovers a haunting paradox of genetic isolation, a mystery that may have sealed their fate long before history ever began. The paradox of purity and the vanishing act. When geneticists declared the ancient Checua people unrelated to the established Native American groups, they meant something profound. They weren't just saying the Checua were distant cousins or part of a different tribe. They were looking at the very base of the human family tree in the Americas, and these individuals were sitting on a separate branch. The evidence showed they represented a previously unknown basal lineage. Imagine the first wave of people who came into South America after crossing the land bridge. The Checua lineage seems to have been one of those very early offshoots, a pioneer group that immediately diverted and set up shop in the Bogota highlands. Their genetic code showed they derived from that initial rapid human spread across the continent, but they didn't join the mainstream. They stayed independent, completely separate from the lines that would go on to populate the rest of the continent, including the later indigenous groups right there in Colombia. This long-term separation led to the defining trait of the Checua people: genetic homogeneity. They were, by all accounts, a comparatively small population of hunter-gatherers who lived in relative isolation for thousands of years. Think about your neighborhood. If everyone there marries someone from the same few families for 4,000 years, the genetic differences eventually smooth out. The Checua were a very tight lineage. This isolation preserved their unique identity, allowing that 6,000 years old genetic signature to remain distinct and clear to modern scientists. This, ironically, is where the scientific wonder turns into a tragic realization. The preservation of their pure, unique DNA, the very thing that makes them a sensational discovery, is also the central mystery of their demise. This is the paradox of purity. The Chekwa held on to their rare, unmixed genetics for millennia, but this tight lineage may have been a ticking clock. Their specialized genetic signature was perfectly optimized for survival in the isolated high-altitude world of the Altiplano. It gave them stability, but it lacked the crucial diversity necessary to adapt when that world eventually changed. A population that small and that pure is fragile. The Chekwa people are not just a story of discovery, but a story of a complete dead end. The central, sobering fact is that after living in the center of the continent for at least 4,000 years, their genes were not passed on. They have no traceable genetic contribution to any ancient or present-day South American populations. Their existence is only confirmed by the few fragile bones left behind. Their unique, unmixed DNA was essentially erased from history. We know where they were, and we know who replaced them, which leads us to the unsettling question: what force was powerful enough to completely sweep away an entire people, leaving not a single genetic trace? To answer that, we must look beyond war and famine and consider the complete pressures that can erase a people from history, for the truth is more elusive than a simple cause and effect. The ancient DNA delivers a chilling fact. The Chekwa lineage was established and thriving in the highlands 6,000 years ago, but by at least 2,000 years ago, their unique genetic signature vanishes entirely. It's an abrupt, clean cut-off. The researchers confirmed this was a complete exchange of the population with absolutely no genetic overlap between the earliest settlers and the people who came after. A whole human population, after millennia of survival, simply stops contributing to the regional gene pool. This total disappearance presents scientists with a profound enigma. Researchers have suggested several plausible causes for the Chekwa people's demise, and the truth is likely a combination of these factors. One possibility is harsh climate conditions, which could have led to a debilitating scarcity of food for these specialized hunter-gatherers, putting constant stress on their small communities. Archaeological evidence already suggests they lived a challenging life. Physical remains from Chekwa show clear signs of health problems, including painful abscesses in the jaw from infections, pointing toward an environment that was already difficult for health and diet. Yet, another compelling theory is that disease played a role. This is where the narrative of their genetic isolation becomes tragic. The Chekwa's DNA was unique and pure, but a small, isolated population can lack the broad immune defenses needed to fight new pathogens. As new, mobile groups began moving through the Colombian corridor, they brought with them a complex cocktail of microorganisms. Scientists note that these new diseases could have devastated an immunologically naive Chekwa population, even if the diseases were relatively harmless to the diverse newcomers. This phenomenon, where pathogens destroy isolated populations, is a recurring, tragic constant in human history. Though we must be clear, for the Chekwa, this is currently a hypothesis, not a settled fact. It's crucial to remember that this ancient event is separate from the devastation caused by European diseases after the arrival of Columbus many thousands of years later. In the Chekwa's case, the total population swap points to a complex picture of migration and replacement. A new genetically distinct group, showing ancestral links to remains found in Panama, arrived in force. Whether the newcomers pushed the Chekwa out through conflict, whether they collapsed due to disease and environmental stress just before the arrival, or whether they simply failed to reproduce as efficiently, the genetic outcome is the same. The ghost lineage was swept away, leaving the high plains clear for the next chapter of human history. The North to South Reset, rewriting the map. As the Chekwa lineage faded from the high plains around Bogota, a vanishing act completed around 2,000 years ago, the vacuum they left didn't last. A new group arrived to take their place. and they brought with them a major cultural upgrade. This transition is clearly marked not just in the genetics, but in the dirt itself. The newcomers introduced the Herrera ceramic complex, a new style of pottery that signaled a huge leap forward in technology and society. Think of pottery as more than just containers. It represents better food storage, organized cooking, and more complex social rituals. Alongside these ceramics came evidence of more sophisticated agriculture, suggesting a shift from the hunter-gatherer lifestyle of the Chekwa to a more settled farming-based existence. Here is where the ancient DNA steps in to answer the big question: who were these people, and where did they come from? When scientists sequenced the genomes of the individuals who lived after the Chekwa disappearance, they found zero genetic connection to the first group. This was the definitive proof of a complete population exchange. But the DNA did talk, and its story was surprising. Instead of showing strong links to groups further south in the Andes, the new population showed strong genetic affinities to populations from the Isthmus of Panama, the narrow land bridge connecting the continents. This confirmed a major migration wave coming into Colombia from Central America. The genetic data strongly suggests these newcomers were related to Chibchan speakers, people whose languages are still spoken in parts of Colombia and Panama today. This reframes the entire history of the region. For generations, the focus had been on how people moved south, passing through Colombia. Now, the DNA reveals a strong, successful migration current, pushing down from the north, replacing the original settlers entirely. It wasn't just a flow out of Colombia, it was a complex flow into Colombia, too. This wave of people, carrying the Herrera ceramics and likely the Chibchan languages, represents a success story of mobility and genetic diversity. They were a genetically varied and robust population, well connected to groups outside the isolated highlands. While the fragile Chekwa were disappearing, perhaps struggling with environmental stress and diseases, these new migrants thrived. They rapidly established themselves across the plateau, their genetic signature taking hold where the Chekwas had just been erased. Their success was profound. They became the direct genetic ancestors of later powerful organized groups in the region, most famously the Muiscas, who flourished right up until the time of European contact. The DNA, therefore, tells a story of two migrations, one lineage that was too isolated and perished, and another lineage that was well connected and survived, becoming the true genetic foundation of Colombian civilization. This single discovery, the rise and fall of two distinct populations, fundamentally challenges the old, tidy maps of the past. It forces us to ask a difficult, continent-sized question. If one entire lineage vanished without a trace, how many more ghost populations are we missing? The story of the Chekwa people completely upends the textbook narrative of American settlement. For decades, the long-held assumption was one of genetic continuity, that the original groups who passed through a region remained there, slowly evolving into the modern indigenous populations. The DNA from the Bogotá Altiplano proves this assumption was wrong. It confirms a far more complex and dynamic history of human migration and population change. The genetic discontinuity is stark. The unique lineage of hunter-gatherers who thrived for 4 millennia was completely replaced by 2,000 years ago. This fact alone challenges the long-held belief that South American history was a simple one-way street. Instead, it reveals a turbulent period of population turnover, where a major migration wave essentially reset the genetic clock for a crucial region of the continent. Crucially, the archaeological evidence suggests this profound change was not necessarily caused by bloodshed. Researchers have found no evidence of widespread conflict or violence associated with this population replacement. This means the dramatic genetic swap likely occurred gradually through processes like sustained migration, intensive cultural exchange, or large-scale intermarriage. The unique Chekwa DNA was either gradually diluted out of the gene pool, or the small population was absorbed into the larger, incoming group. It was a genetic replacement achieved not by war, but by demographics and cultural momentum. This leads us back to the paradox of purity. and the deeper implication of this study. If one deeply rooted, genetically distinct lineage could vanish completely from the gene pool of the high plains, despite the fact that their unique DNA was still present in the oldest samples, how many other ghost populations are hidden in the great unsequenced regions of the Americas? This discovery proves that early human history in the New World was a tangled web of isolated success stories and total genetic dead ends. The Chakua people now serve as a powerful reminder that our map of the first Americans is still being drawn. Their story forces scientists to shift their focus from looking for one continuous migration to actively hunting for hidden, lost lineages in overlooked areas. Their complete disappearance, whether from illness, environmental stress, or peaceful absorption, underscores the fragility of small, isolated groups facing the relentless pressure of dynamic, interconnected populations. The DNA from the Chakua bones speaks volumes about diversity and disappearance. They were a distinct lineage, erased by time, replacement, and perhaps a lack of genetic resilience. If these people only appeared on our map because they settled a high-altitude site that perfectly preserved their bones, what other unique, lost human histories are still buried, unsequenced, beneath the Amazonian jungle or the depths of the Pacific coast? This forgotten chapter reminds us that history is not finished. It is simply waiting, silently, to be unearthed and rewritten. Let us know in the comments below. If you found this story as fascinating as we did, click on the next video on your screen. And don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more deep dives into history's greatest mysteries.